Good morning, everybody. My name is Beth, and I'm an alcoholic. I just started shaking. I haven't been shaking. Now I'm shaking. That's awesome. So I hope everybody had a great evening and actually picked up their coffee from the drive-thru, unlike myself. So I want to say thank you to everybody that put this together. I'm not sure how I got on the flyer, but I'm very, very grateful that I get to be here with all of you today. And I want to thank the speakers from last night. It's been a very long time since I've been at a big book study, like a full-on weekend whole thing doing it. And last night, I was kind of sitting here going, I think I'm the least experienced with the fourth step in this group of speakers, as I think I've done 7 or 8 fourth steps, full-on inventories. Mostly because it takes me, like every time I've gone through the work, I go from the preface and the forwards through 164, so I do the whole thing, and it takes me usually 9 months, sometimes a year. And every time I do it, I get a totally new big book. And the reason I do this is because my pride and my ego will manipulate inventory, will manipulate amends if I know what's coming. So, each time I've gone through the work, I've gone through with a different person. And so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the mechanics and what your fourth step sheets should look like, because I've done it many, many ways. All of them have been through the book, and none of them look like anything like the other. My first inventory broke the fourth column out into 7 columns, which was exactly what I needed, and it's actually still the one that I go to when I need like a mini inventory, like, I started a new job, everybody's out to kill me. Probably not accurate. And I still go back to those sheets. I think it's where I came from. Cass is still my sponsor. But the rest of the women that I went through the book with, all different kinds, and I've done extended third column inventory, was an actual name for one, and then I went through one where the way we went through the book was I basically wound up rewriting the first 164 pages into where they fall. Prayers, God, I have to remember them. Prayers, warnings, prayers, everywhere it said God. There was these like columns. I wound up basically rewriting the book or copying it. I didn't write this. Anyway. So there's no wrong way to go through the steps. My day of grace is August 22nd, 1991, and I don't know how or why that is, except that, like Nicoletta talked about last night, I realized nothing. It just showed up. You know what I mean? It's just, I came home from the other side of the country, which I did not intend to do. I bought a one-way ticket out there. I detoxed in my bed, and I went back to school. It started my senior year in high school. I didn't go through the work until I had 6.5 years sober. And I don't negate the 6.5 years that I stayed sober, because that would be telling God that he wasn't keeping me sober those 6.5 years. But for 5 of them, I was basically, for the most part, homeless. I was out in Sussex County, so I would sleep on people's couches. I would try to rent a room. Sometimes I slept in my car. I stayed with my sponsor for 6 months, and I used the F word too much, so I had to go. I lived in a halfway house for 7 months, and I just kept moving around, and I just kept starting over. And when I went to this halfway house, I think I had 4 years sober. 2 years. I had 2 years sober when I moved into the halfway house, and I did my first fourth step. And it looked very different. It wasn't out of the book. Nobody was talking about the book. Peter was saying something last night about, you want to go through the big book because it's fashionable. I'm like, no, not when I was going through it. But I did some kind of inventory, and I was able to learn a couple of things in that place that brought me to a higher standard, like, brushing your teeth every day, making your bed every day. But But at 6.5 years sober, I wanted to get a bottle of Bacardi rum. I was over 21. I was at Area 44 conference, and I wanted to buy a bottle of Bacardi rum and drive my car off an overpass. I had literally tried everything to control and manage my recovery. I took credit for my recovery. I took credit for my sobriety. I took credit for my life. I took credit for everything good in my life, and I blamed everybody for everything else. So I went through the book, and as it was very well put last night, I kind of steps 1, 2, and 3 to get us to 4. Number 1, we're beyond human aid. Number 2, we awaken to the power that is beyond humanity. And number 3, we relinquish control. And what came out of my pen this morning was, number 4 is acknowledge self-protection, and what am I protecting? God made me how I am. And I think I started kind of thinking this way when I had kids. I have my God, my understanding of God. And everything that happened to me and everything that I am and everything that I do and everything I say and I be is perfect in God's eyes at all times. God does never judge me. And you guys talked about it last night. God's loved me this entire time. But through my human experiences of becoming the person I need to be so that I could become the person that I am, a lot of stuff went down. Then we're going to add on top of it the fact that I am definitely an alcoholic, as I found out when I kind of went through that first step process. And I'm way more sensitive than non-alcoholics. Every person that I've worked with in Alcoholics Anonymous is like a rock-hard shell with a raw nerve on the outside of the shell, and everything else is on the inside. I'm more deeply affected by absolutely nothing than anybody else. So when I entered inventory for the first time, my sponsor had me go. I was 6.5 years sober. I was very proud of myself for all that I had accomplished. And I was really afraid to go through this book because everything's fine, I'm fine, everything's fine. I just had a bad day, I just wanted to kill myself again, whatever. I'm fine, whistling in the dark, right? It talks about it in the book. And I think it's on 52. Where are the bedevilments? 52. It is 52, right? Why can't I find it? My sponsor took me to the bedevilments, and they're here on 52 somewhere, because I can't see anything right now. And she had me put them each in question form on the top of a page, one for each page, and I was to sit with it in meditation every day for a week. And I had to start asking myself, where am I having personal relations problems and personal relationships? Where do I not feel that I can be of service to others? How am I not making a living? What does my career look like, or my job life, my vocation? When am I prey to misery and depression? I remember writing all the time, always, everywhere. And I wrote these things out, and I started to realize that I had a lot more information for inventory than I realized. And I went through inventory the first time with Cass, and I got stuck at the end, and I think it was just this incredible fear of having an experience. What if I change? What if something happens to me and I'm not me anymore? And I'll never forget, we're in the sponsee meeting one Tuesday night, and Cass says, well, what are you afraid is going to change? I'm like, well, what if I lose my sense of humor? And she's like, you're not funny. But in order for me to finish my first inventory, she told me, I called her up and I said, I'm cooked, I'm done, I can't do this. And she said, it's okay, just come over, I was like, what? So I showed up at her house, and she sat me down at her dining room table, right in view of the stove, and she made fresh meatballs and spaghetti, and I wasn't allowed to have any until I finished my inventory, and so I finished my inventory. Because we'll do whatever it takes to help others. And there's the three, I'm pretty sure everybody in here has been through inventory, but there's the resentment inventory, the fear inventory, the harms done others inventory, and the relationship intimacy inventory. And then there's the sex ideal. As far as mechanics, I will say that there's a million forms of self that I had to weed through. And the fact that I also had to take into consideration of what was real and what was fancied and what I felt like putting on the paper and what needed to go on the paper. All of it had to go on the paper, and it was hard. But it wasn't hard because of the fourth step. It was hard because I was already in my mind in my fifth step. I heard for years in an area where I got sober, whether there was Big Book or not is debatable, but it sure wasn't in entering these ears. All I ever heard anybody say was that inventory is the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's scary, it's overwhelming. I mean, there was definitely this boogeyman kind of vibe around inventory, and so I was like, well, I'm not doing that. And what I realized through actually writing inventory is that nothing is going to come out of that pen that wasn't already there. And I never heard that. Nobody ever said that about inventory. And so anybody that, the first time I'll sit down with the girls that I'm sponsoring, it's like, what are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? These are my expectations. What are yours? What does this look like? And if they say they're afraid of the inventory, I'm like, well, what are you afraid of coming out? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you were there the whole time. And if you don't remember it yet, I highly doubt it's going to jump out of the pen without your knowledge. The reality for me was that I'm always in one step ahead or one step behind, right? And the only place that I can find God is in this present moment, which I'm allergic to. So I'm one step ahead and one step behind. I'm not in the moment, and I wonder why I can't find God and I can't have this experience. So my sponsor is really, really good at bringing me back to the present moment, which is when I can get back into inventory. I utilize all of my inventories still. I think I have every single one of them except for one. And there have been times where I've been stumped in my 11th step, where I don't know where this is coming from. It's come up 3 times in a row on the 11th step, and I don't know where it's come from. I need to reach back to my inventory because my pride and my spiritual ego likes to tell me that I'm all better now, and that, issues of the past have been dealt with, and that, I'm fine, everything's fine. And so I use my inventory when things come up 3 times in a row. I'll bring it to Cass, or I'll bring it to Anne Marie, or now I get to bring it to Nicoletta. And we look at it. I know it's coming from somewhere. And somebody else is going to talk about 10-step. My favorite thing in the world is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. I am not about wasting my time. I am not about recreating the wheel. I need to get stuff done. I'm in the portion of my life where I'm moving at a very rapid pace, and God throws things at me in the moment that need to be dealt with in the moment. So I use my inventory to go back and find out where the core issue stems from, and it always stems, for me, from fear. Every resentment that I have ever had stems from fear. Every self-protection, which is just another word for character defect or shortcoming, comes from protecting myself because I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? That God's not going to have my back. Even though I can tell you, just this last week, God is always there. God always has my back. God had my back before I knew there was a God. He's always been there. But I'm so busy being in tomorrow or yesterday, before or after, that I can't be with him. Right? God is right here, right now. God is polite. My sponsor used to say, God is polite. He'll only get involved if you ask him to. And I would say, God, get involved. And somebody came up to me after our speaking commitment and said, isn't that more of a command and not a request? And I said, with knowing me, yes, definitely. One of the things that comes from doing inventory, and for me, the biggest inventories And the most beneficial inventories have come when there are major life changes. What are major life changes? You could call them life seasons. So I did inventory after I got married, because I wasn't just Beth, now I was Beth and Dan. And I did inventory after my second child showed up, because now it's chaotic. And it's not just two people with a kid, it's two people with 18 kids, or two, same thing. I did a major inventory when I was married 9 years, and we went through an insane shift. And it was either cut and run or look at myself, and he looked at himself, thank God. And then I did a major inventory after I blew my life up. So I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity, and I know that it was a privilege. But I got to stay home. And we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in order to do it, because we couldn't afford to have 2 kids here. But I went back to work. We moved back to Jersey, and with the goals that we had, you know, wanting to be able to pay for our kids' college, wanting to be able to buy our kids a car when they turn 17, you know, regular parent planning. I mean, we had an account. We didn't know whether it was a college account or a rehab account. We're still not sure. But we wanted to put these things aside, and I wanted to go back to work. I felt like it was time. And the first year, 10 months, I made it 10 months. So instead of being a normal person, I decided to be me, and I went from being a stay-at-home mom to working 90 hours a week. And when I tell you I blew my life up, my best friend Anne-Marie and I, we really did not communicate on an open or vulnerable level for 18 months after I quit the job. These are the people that I rely on to stay sober. These are the people, not to stay sober, but to stay connected with my God. And, you know, my son was turning 11, and I asked him, I said, what do you want for your birthday? And he said, 2 hours of your time without your phone. And I quit like 3 days later. But it took me 18 months to recover from what I had done to my life, because in perfect alcoholic fashion, career has always been my hardest learning curve with God. And I understand it more now in the fact that it's my job that I have to do. I couldn't connect how God was supposed to show up in my career. And it was a hard learning curve, but I went through the work again, and I went through hard. Started from the beginning. I looked at everything. I ripped apart every nook and cranny. I went back. I think that inventory was probably the most thorough inventory I had done since the first one I did with Cass, and I knew I needed to do it because I was almost in a blackout for most of that time. I was almost I remember just staring at the wall for 3 hours, waiting for the next thing to come my way so I could finish it. I became a taskmaster. And anybody who knows me knows that's not who I am. That's not who this is. I'm not a doer. I'm a beer, 100%. And I'd blown my life up, and I went through everything, and then I started my round of amends. And even months after that, it still took me months after that to fully recover and allow myself to be open and vulnerable like I usually am, like I was before I went to work, and so I could continue my path. It's almost like I went to work and I was on my spiritual path, and I thought this is going to be great and this is going to be wonderful and this is what I'm called to do. And it's like I literally took a hard right off of the path, took 10 months kind of, I'm going to go, and then got plopped back on the path. And it took me a while to believe again that God had my back. And it wasn't because God had left me. It's just that I had decided to take my will and my life back in my hands through my career and do whatever the hell I want to do with it. So I blew it up. But I'm grateful for inventory. I don't like doing inventory. My best friend likes doing inventory. And I hate it. I don't want to sit down. I don't want to look at my behavior. I don't want to look at the fact that I allowed myself to get involved when God was doing a perfectly good job. These are things that for me come up in recovery, right? It goes way back to the second step where it's like I'm agnostic in this area, right? When I went back to work, I became agnostic in my career. I was in charge. I took my will and my life back, and I started doing inventory on everything else. And that kind of backwards way up and out of the center where God is. Character defects for me are nothing more than ways to protect myself when I don't believe that God can protect me or will protect me. I learned this lesson when my dad passed away. I shut God out of my life very quickly. And I was super mad at him that he took my dad away. It felt like I had just rekindled or started a relationship with this human being, and it felt like we were still getting to know each other, and then he had to go, and I got mad, and I took my will back and almost choked the living daylights out of my marriage, because if you're going to take that guy out of my life, you're not taking this one. So I took God out of my marriage and basically choked it to death, which then brought me to my next run through the steps. I don't regret anything that I've done that has brought me to doing inventory. I don't regret my choices, and I don't regret anything anymore. I cannot be the person that stands in front of you unless I had traveled the exact path that I had. But inventory is a very good way. It sets us up for the rest of the steps, right? It sets us up all the way through 9. The way my first sponsor did it, it even does my 8th step is just right there at the end. Just have to put that on the card and get out there. My inventory is always good to go back because there are some core issues that will never go away. And I will find new and interesting ways to self-protect them so that I don't feel hurt, so that I don't have to remind myself or be reminded of X, Y, and Z. There are some things that fundamentally change and create who we are, not for the rainbows and unicorns, I think somebody said last night. And there are hard parts of life that will always be there. There are hard parts of my past that will always be there. And there's an energy, right? There's an energy that we live in when we choose to be in this present moment, when we choose to be on the broad highway, when we choose to commence shoulder to shoulder. There's an energy that exists between us. And sometimes that energy mingles with my energy and brings me to a place of unsafety. And sometimes, instead of reaching up, I reach in, and then I self-protect. Now, you'd think that's pretty human. And trust me, I know a lot of people not in AA that have the luxury of doing that. But as we talked about yesterday in the 3rd step, if the connection, right? It talks about, we read it in every meeting. It blows my mind that nobody in general AA really knows this, that we've placed ourselves beyond human aid. And if you buy into what we're doing here, then it's on the premise that I'm beyond human aid. And in step 2, we learn that the only thing that has ever or will ever keep me sober is a power greater than myself, right? For me, it's the spirit of the universe, right? My body is made of the same stuff that the sun is. Like, it's amazing. There's this energy, right? So that's the only thing that's going to keep me from picking up a drink and give me the opportunity to create the fellowship and the reality I crave. But it says in here, I'm awful at finding stuff in the book. This is what resentments do. And for me, every single one of my resentments came down to a fear. So search refilled forms right from its stem all spiritual disease. We were hurt and threatened. Oh, there we go. On page 66, it says, "For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit." Right? Spirit is capitalized, which means it's another word that Bill uses for God. And if I have these defects of character, and I have these resentments, and I have these fears, and I am self-protecting myself, the way I see it is I've put myself in a lead ball, and God can't get through. So what am I really doing? I'm walking myself back out there. That scares me. Nothing scares me. That scares me. Being alone, I'm really good with it. God's going to take the house? Fine. I have teenagers, still alive. I'm walking myself back out the door to drink because I really have a very, very solid feeling I don't get to die if I drink. And I can tell you another thing, at 18 years sober, I didn't even have to drink. And I was completely isolated from that power. And I was miserable, absolutely miserable. So this really is the scariest thing for me. I made a decision about 10, 12 years ago that I'm gonna suck the marrow out of life. I'm just gonna do whatever I wanna do. My sponsor used to tell me that God doesn't care what you do. He does not care whether you get married or you don't get married. You have kids, you don't have kids. You have a career, you're homeless. He doesn't care. God wants one thing for us, is to be happy, joyous, and free. Okay, happy, joyous, free. Got it. What does that look like? Every single person in here, it's different because this is my experience, right? My path created this human. So in order for this human to be happy, joyous, and free, what do I have to do to get there, right? Joy is a product of what I've done. Happiness is, for me, it's settled, right? I'm comfortable and I'm at peace, right? And free means I can go do whatever I want. I'm gonna go do whatever I want. I had to do inventory to unpack all of the stuff that I had packed because I was too afraid to let God come in and take. So I unpack all of this, right? And you guys are going to do a masterful job for the rest of the day, and I can just sit and listen on how we do that. Because the goal here, you guys, is I have this life. And whether you believe in reincarnation or not, this is the life that you are living right now. If you don't like it, change it. We're not slaves anymore. God did not relieve me from the mental obsession of trying to kill myself with alcohol for me to be miserable. He wants me to be happy. He wants me to go out there and make a beautiful mess, which I am very good at. I made a decision about 10 or 12 years ago that I will never go another day without feeling joy, which also requires a shit ton of work. For me to experience joy, I have to have a life of purpose. It's why I feel joy. For me, I have to have a life of being of service. Now listen, if I don't have to leave my house ever again, I would be so happy. COVID was like a dream come true for me. I'm the biggest introvert on the face of the earth. I literally have the basement to myself with my sewing machine, and I would be very, very happy. And I tried that for a couple months during COVID. And I wasn't so happy, and I definitely wasn't feeling free. And then I realized there's no PPE in the hospitals. So I went on Google, and I went on YouTube, and I researched filters, and I researched fabric, and I researched, what's the best way for a mask to be worn, and what do they need, and we called the hospital, and we asked could they use them, and I made about 250 masks for hospital staff, because I have to live a life of purpose. But I also really want to be alone in my basement with my sewing machine. So it's my job to find a way. God has given me everything I need to do whatever I want, But in order for me to feel joy, it's got to be for something. This all isn't possible until I do inventory. None of this is possible until I look at, I hate using this word because my kids use it, what are my triggers? If I don't know who I am, how am I supposed to figure out how to get to where the person is that I want to be? How do I figure out that path? This is the beginning. This is how I react in these situations. This is what I do to people when my security or my safety is threatened. These are the things that I have to be on watch for. Yes, God is going to take away my character defects in 7, but as I like to point out, because I am the loophole queen, or so my sponsor says, is that that 7-step prayer says, the usefulness to you or my fellows, and I'm like, well, he didn't render me white as snow, and I still am a very interesting human. So I have to do my best every day to include a power greater than myself that can bring me to a place that I can be of service so that I can feel joy. I love my life. I love my life. Inventory has prepared me for the last 2 years of what my husband has been going through. And my husband, big, strong, stoic guy. I'm good. He ain't good. He's going back through his life. He has gone back to therapy. He has gone back to looking at where he came from, and it's devastating. His past is devastating. If I had not done inventory, I would still have an expectation that he would be my hero and that he would always take care of me and be unflawed, which would leave him in a place of never being able to share openly as my spiritual partner about where he is at and what he's experiencing, which initially, I know I'm spitballing here, but I'm pretty sure that if he was going through this and he wasn't able to share this journey with me, we would start to get separated and eventually we would both part ways. But I don't want to. I love him. He's epic. But watching him go through what he's been going through for the past, I think 2 years, 18 months, something like that. I don't know time. COVID killed time. I've been able to create a safe space for him to have his experience and to support his feelings and to join him in wanting to bash a couple of people from his past in their face. I'm not above a throat punch. Inventory helped me come to a place where when my daughter started shifting from being a child to being, I don't want to say adult because I'm not even an adult, but whatever that next phase is, I was able to take myself out and shift with her instead of against her. So she's like a Libra on the last day, right? She's born on the 22nd. She was due on the 29th. I'm the 31st. We basically both clones of each other. Even my husband was like, I don't know if everybody's going to make it out of this alive. I said, me either. And now we're on the other side of it. And there's this human being. They come into my room. I go to bed at 9. And every single night, it started during COVID, they come in to my room and they sit on my bed, and no matter how tired I am or how exhausted or how much I want to read my book, they want to tell me how their day is. And the stuff that comes out of her mouth took me years. She's the kind of kid that that Roblox game, and she's playing there, she's telling me, this was a couple of years ago, but she's telling me, I'm playing Roblox, and this girl who's younger than her, or at least she said she was, who knows online, and, somebody came and stole all of her Roblox stuff. And so my daughter gave her all of hers. I would never have done that. I would have looked around the house and said, is there anything left that I can grab before you realize it? but not her. My husband and I have created a safe space for her to express herself in this way. We live by example, right? We understand our flaws. My daughter will tell you, obviously the spitting image of me, that she has an anger problem. She's aware of it. She knows that her self-protection is to become angry and scare you away. I've watched her pause in it. And it's the most miraculous thing I've ever seen. She is growing in a way that she is aware of the stuff that we told ourselves delusional lies about for years and years and years. I guarantee you I'm living in some delusional lie as we speak. I'm a very flawed human, totally okay with it. But she's living in this way, and my son is the same way. My son, he's 16, and he's like, I've noticed that Grandma doesn't treat Violet, whose name was Morgan, but she changed it. She doesn't treat Violet half as well as she treats me. And I'm like, well, she does cry on her birthday every year when Grandma doesn't show up, but, Grandma is self-absorbed a little bit. And he says, yeah, well, it's not okay with me anymore. And, my husband and I are sitting there. We have our own issues with my in-laws. They're lovely people. And I said, you're in charge of your relationships. You do have to accept her as she is. He says, but I don't have to accept her behavior towards my sister. This comes from him. He knows who he is. He knows that when he writes her this letter, that he's going to go overboard. And so he comes to me and he goes, Mom, I need to run this by you before I give it to her. And I said, okay, shoot. And he reads it, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's pretty ballsy to say there, buddy. And he goes, why? He's asking the right questions. It's amazing. We live by this example. We do inventory when necessary, right? I don't always know when it's necessary. It's usually my friends that are like, dude, seriously, it's time. We live by this example, and I feel so grateful that the people around me do it. They follow this lead. I get to lead. I have an employee for the first time in my whole life that reports to me. It's kind of weird. Looks at me with doe eyes all the time. And I'm like afraid to make the wrong move. So finally, I just got real with him. I'm like, don't do everything I do. Only do some of it. That, the stuff we're supposed to do. And I'm honest with him as a whole human being. And he asks the right questions. And I watch him on his path. And I give him what he asks for. Because that's what I've been asked to do. All of this is because I know that being open and vulnerable is a challenge and not my first choice, which is why my best friends are all very open and vulnerable. I'm the dumbest one in the room at all times. I want to be like you. I'm going to follow you. So I know, because of my inventory, that when I'm nervous, that when I'm scared, I'm going to be less likely to allow myself to be open and vulnerable. I'm going to less likely be willing to show my flaws or to show my humanness. So I know that I have to try. This is where I grow. Because I know my inventory, and Nicolette is going to talk about what we do with it, I get to know where I need to ask God to get involved. Give me the strength to be vulnerable. God, help me be who you think I am. My favorite prayer in the entire book is, remove my fear and direct my attention to who you would have me be. And because of that, I'm not a doer. I'm an absolute beer. I will never hustle, and I will always do my best to observe and move slowly with purpose. You know, my sisterhood, we meet well, we just changed it to Tuesdays, but we meet every week on Zoom. We're all over the place. And I meet at my sponsor's house every other Saturday, where apparently I do 4 and 5 all the time. I don't buy it. And we set out these intentions almost every morning, where we call it Tool for the Day. And most of the time, I'm going to move slowly with purpose. I am not going to allow myself to drift away from my center, right, from the right here, right now, because when that happens, all hope is lost. Like, literally, I feel no hope unless I'm here, because this is where God is. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to share. Thanks.